Hello, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me fine. Um, Please do let me know if you can't. I'm very sorry about the late start. There was some tech issues, which does happen, but hopefully everything is in working order now. Thank you all very much for joining this session. So my name is Chloe. I am an early careers recruiter for Azets. So I recruit for our Midlands offices and our Yorkshire region as well. We're a team made up of 7 currently. So we have other recruiters in other regions, and we are all over the UK as a company, if you didn't know. So everywhere from Scotland to London to Truro. So we are definitely everywhere. But today what I'm going to be doing is taking you through the final stage in our recruitment process, which is the interview. So if you do have any questions whatsoever throughout, please do feel free to pop them in the chat, or even turn your mic on if you would like to ask any questions. I will do a bit of a Q&A at the end, but if anything pops up and you don't want to forget, of course, please do put it in the chat box. So firstly, just a bit of an introduction on Azets, in case you aren't really sure of who we are as a company. So we are a top 10 accountancy firm within the UK. So we offer multiple services in accounting, tax, audit and advisory as well. So our early careers programme is a major part of the organisation. So we, on average, each year, take on about 400 trainees, and this is across multiple roles such as graduate placements, internships, things like that. And as I said, we have multiple offices all over the UK, so all of our trainees are spread out amongst those different offices. And our roles really just encourage you to gain both practical experience and the theoretical experience, so you will eventually become a chartered accountant. Our main opportunities often are in tax, audit and accountancy, but we do have some kind of what we call national service headlines. So those include things like internal audit compared to external audit, and we have corporate finance and some business tech roles, wealth management. So we've got a real variety there. So now on to the interview. So previous stages in our recruitment process include your typical things like application screening, phone call screening. So we will give you a call, ask you any questions that we need, and we do have an online assessment element as well. But the final stage in the process is a final interview. And ideally this is face-to-face. We can make some exceptions where needs be. As I said, we've got many different offices, so you might be applying for somewhere quite far away from home, or if you're at university. So we do try and accommodate all needs, but we do ideally like these to be in person, so you get a feel for the office and for the team. So this is what our interview invite looks like. So the stage before this is the screening call, and this is where we will let you know if you are progressing on to the next stage or not, and that will be this final interview. So following that, you will receive this invite via email, and this will go over all the details of the interview. So just to run through it, you can see the kind of standard information there. So things like date, time, the dress code, all very standard. And we will also let you know who your interviewers are, so you know how many people to expect on the day, just so you can be a bit more comfortable. And of course, if you want to have a little nosy on LinkedIn at some of those people, we will of course give you the location or a link if it is to be held virtually. And then we get into the body of the email invite. So we will give you some points to prepare on. So this first section, titled Interview Preparation, will give you a bit of a rundown. So this mentions things like within our company, we don't use CVs, we use an application form. So an interviewer won't have seen your CV or any information prior to your interview. So therefore it is on you to share any relevant information you think the interviewer will need that is on your CV that they won't have seen beforehand. So just some ideas there of what you can expect and what we would encourage you to prepare for. So things like your academic background, if you've done any volunteer work, if you take part in any kind of extracurriculars activities at university and things like that, they're all really good points in getting to know you as an individual, but also where you get your skill set from. Then onto these bullet points here, we go into a little bit more depth on what the interviews will be specifically looking for. So we're asking you to demonstrate here some awareness of the service line that you've applied to. As I said, we've got lots of different opportunities, lots of different service lines we offer. So it's really important that you do some specific research in that area. You get a bit of an understanding of what the day-to-day might look like and some of the main responsibilities of the role. Then we're also asking you to look into any qualifications associated with the roles. So all of our graduate roles will have a professional qualification associated with them. If you are applying for a placement or an internship, this won't be the case. It will just be the day-to-day work, but on our grad schemes, each role has a professional qualification associated with it. So this could be something like the ACA or the CTA route. So it's really important that you get a good understanding of this qualification, some of the exams, what it's structured like, just so we can assess that you are committed. It is quite a big undertaking, studying alongside working. So we do want to get a good understanding that you know what you're taking on and that you are committed to this kind of route. And then finally, in these bullet points, we want to know why you're passionate about joining Azets as a company in particular. What drew you to our companies, or anything in particular that stands out? So do some company research here. And my tip would be to not make it generic. So a lot of the time you'll hear your company was founded 5 years ago, something like that, which we know, we work for the company, we're kind of clued in on all the ins and outs and the day-to-day bits. So if there's something like the charity work that we do, our values is always a big one, something a little bit more specific to show to us that you've not just glanced at our website, that you've actually done some solid research into the organisation. So now going into a little bit more detail on that company information bit. So just some sources here where you can find that information. So within our website, we've got quite a comprehensive website. So you can see things like our social commitment. So any kind of projects like Net Zero we're a part of, if we do any kind of activities like the plastic pickup days, things like that. If you research, it shows us that you've put some thought into why you want to work for us. And then this also tells us a little bit about you if you're passionate about these initiatives as well. We've got a sectors section on the website as well. So this will give you some information on what kind of clients we have. So some might be healthcare, charities, not-for-profit, public sector, things like this. Again, you're doing that little bit extra research into the company. You've got an understanding of who our client base might be. We hear sometimes that some of the clients are quite kind of near and dear to our applicants. If their parents work in that industry, for example, and they've grew up being surrounded by that. So again, that just lets us get to know you a little bit better if there's a kind of personal link there. We also have our Life at Azets section. So this will go into a little bit more detail about the graduate routes or the trainee routes. So we'll highlight things like the work-life balance. Of course, we want you to be dedicated and work hard, but we also have lots of fun things that go on at the company that we want you to be excited about. So you can find some information there. And then we have things like mental health first aiders, which of course is very important within the organisation. We want to make sure everyone's safe and happy where they are. And I think that is very important to lots of people, including our potential applicants who might need that support. And it's always great to know it's on offer. So you could look more into that. And then we've got our news and insights tab as well. So this will go over any kind of updates on budgets, cybersecurity, HMRC, things that are changing quite rapidly or that you need to kind of be clued in on. Keeping up to date with the news and what's going on within this sector is very useful. It's something you'd have to do whilst you're in the role. So this is a good kind of point to look at. And then there's, of course, other areas where you can look into the company. So we do have a LinkedIn page. And then, of course, from there, you can look into the posts, see any kind of stories that we're promoting, any success stories. So, for example, our audit team in Yorkshire just won the Audit Team of the Year award, which is amazing. So you can get some information, some insights there. And then, of course, look through connections and respectfully follow employees if you would like to, and get some kind of insights on maybe the day-to-day, what their roles are, what they've been a part of. So that's some sources there where you can get some company information, get to know the organisation a little bit better, and of course that will help when preparing for the interview. If you've done some solid research, when you're asked about why you want to work for us, about our values and things, these are really good points to refer back to. So now on to some interview preparation. So you've got your invite through, you know you've got your interview coming up. What do you start to think about now? So firstly, about yourself. So right at the beginning of the interview, we will ask you a question about yourself. I know it's everyone's favourite question, tell me about yourself, but it does give us some really good insights. So some things to think about here are what you're currently studying at university, what was your motivation for choosing that route? Maybe you did it at A-level or BTEC, or maybe it was something completely new that you saw on an open day or something and it caught your attention. You thought your skills and your interests really aligned with that. So a bit of context there. What inspired you to pursue the career in your chosen area? Have you been interested in tax for a really long time? Are you seeing it as a new challenge? So we welcome students from all areas. So if you are thinking, oh, I don't study accounting and finance directly, is this going to hurt me in this section? Don't worry at all. We've got people from law, biology backgrounds, all sorts. So we're just getting to know you a bit here. So don't feel too much pressure if you're not studying accounting and finance directly. It won't hinder you. And then some other kind of more personal bits is to think about is to discuss any volunteer work you've done, if you do any extracurricular activities, which might seem irrelevant to some of you, but if you let us know you're part of a football team, for example, I know our Nottingham office do five-a-side and stuff like that. So it could be a really good link, and it just helps us get to know you as a person and see if you'd be a good team fit. So of course, don't go on and on about things that aren't relevant and make things too informal, but giving a personal touch in this area is always nice. Then we move on to the kind of company role section of the interview. So here we will start to ask you about why you decided to apply to the company specifically, which is where you can draw on the company information you've done. What drew you to the service line in particular? So, for example, if you've applied for our public sector audit roles, are you really interested in how our taxes are spread out, where they go, things like that, for example? So just think about your motivations. We want really passionate students who are going to be dedicated. So we want to know you've not just applied for any old role at any old company, that you do want to work for Azets for specific reasons, and this is a route that you've thought about. Then we will, of course, ask you about your skill set. So what skills do you think that you have that are relevant to this role? So it's a good idea for any interview to consider what skills you have and where you've gained them or where you're currently using them. So you can use things like the STAR technique there to really draw on your experiences and which skills you've developed as a result. And then, of course, again, we will ask you about the qualification route. It is a large part of the role. So we do want to know that you've looked into this, you are serious about undertaking the qualification. So what do you know about the qualification? What research have you done into it? How do you think you would balance studying towards this qualification alongside working full time? We, of course, will support you at the organisation. So we do things like a mentorship scheme. Lots of our partners and managers have been through the route themselves, so they've got a really good understanding of what kind of support you will need, but what kind of actions will you be putting in place to make sure you've got a good balance. And then that leads into which techniques you can use as well. So are you a person who really utilises a calendar or a to-do list? What kind of specific tools are you using to support you there? So that's some things to think about ahead of the interview. I know it seems quite like a lot, but you'll need these things for any interview. You'll need to consider why you want to work there, what skills you have that matches the role, and then why you want the role itself. So now, just before the interview, so some things to think about. So as I said, the majority of our interviews are in person. So we do like you to get a bit of a feel for the office, know the route, if you are commuting, if it's somewhere new, figure that out, things like that. So always check your route to the office, make sure you can get there on time, you know what time to set off in the morning or the afternoon, things like that. We ask that you arrive at least 10 minutes early, which is pretty standard. Something to bear in mind is that a lot of our offices are in a shared building. So it's a case of arriving early enough to be prepared, but not too early that you're sitting in a kind of main reception area. So about 10 minutes is appropriate. Reread through the interview invite thoroughly so you've got all the information you need, you're not missing any key details there. Think about your dress. So it is a professional environment, so we do want you to dress formal for the interview. So it just makes a good impression. It sets the kind of right tone for the interview as well. And then finally, your interviewers haven't seen your CV, as I said, so it is really up to you to share any information that you think is relevant to them. So it won't be a case of your interviewer sitting in front of you saying, it says here on your CV, XYZ, can you elaborate? So the onus is really on you to say, this is who I am, this is my experience, this is where I've worked, this is any voluntary work I've done, and this is my skill set. In the cases where your interview will be virtual, just some things to prepare in advance is downloading the Teams app rather than using the browser. So we do use Teams for our interviews. Hopefully a lot of you are familiar with it, using it for university and things like that. But it's always good just to do a test run. Doing a quick mic and camera test. I know it might seem a bit ironic that I had technical issues this morning, but we do appreciate it happens. So do any tests where possible, just to make sure everything's running and everything can go smoothly. You're probably a little bit nervous ahead of the interview, so you don't need to be adding tech issues onto that pressure. And then make sure you maintain eye contact throughout the call. It's something that you can kind of forget when you're virtual because you're talking to a screen, but it's really important to try and remember that you're addressing the interviewers, not the screen, and make any eye contact where possible. So now what to expect on the day for the actual interview. So our interviews typically last around 1 hour. Of course, this is an estimate, but this is usually how long they will last. You can expect to be interviewed by 1 or 2 team members, and they will be from the service line that you've applied for. So they'll be doing the day-to-day, have a really good awareness of the industry, the sector, and then the individual service line. So if you do have any questions, of course, they'll be the best fit to answer that. Some teams may offer you an office tour, so you get to know the environment a little bit, just walk you around some of our spaces, and then you can expect a final outcome for your interview within the 2-week mark. So, of course, this might fluctuate if we have people on sick leave and they've done the interview, they're the only ones with the feedback, for example. But we do really respect that you've taken the time and the effort to attend the interview. So we do try to get back to you as quickly as possible. So just a little reminder that I wanted to put in as well is that interviews can be really nerve-wracking, but our interviews do this very regularly. A lot of them do it year on year. We have the same interviewers year on year because they're kind of up to date with all the recruitment processes and have kind of built that report up and are really in a good position to be doing interviews. So they are very familiar with it, with the ins and outs of it. So there is no need to be nervous. Appreciate you will be, especially if it's your first kind of professional interview that you've done. But our interviews will completely understand this. So don't let being overly nervous get in the way of being able to share your skills and experience with the interviewer. So just some key tips now to kind of wrap things up. So number one would be to do your research. So I've gone over some areas where you can do research. So websites, LinkedIn, other social media. We do have an Instagram account as well. So those areas, just make sure you've got a good awareness of the company, of the role, of the qualifications. As I keep saying, we do want to know that you're committed and you're passionate and that this isn't just a grad scheme that you've applied for. This is something that you really see yourself doing long term and that you want to commit to. Know your skill set. So the interview will go a lot smoother if you have already thought about all the skills that you have, where you've gained them and how you use them. So you're not on the spot thinking, oh, I'm sure I've done this. I'm sure I'm a good communicator, but I can't think of a time when. So again, using tools like the STAR technique, perhaps, to really structure your answer. When I was going through my grad search, I would always write my skills down. I would structure it like the STAR technique, and then it would get smaller and smaller to where in the end I would only need a bullet point and that would trigger my response. So sometimes it's doing that. Sometimes it's doing mock interviews. I know they're not the most fun things to do, but they really do help. And you do kind of want to know your own experience and skills in and out. Read through the interview invite carefully. So we have had instances where somebody's missed a key bit of information. Maybe they've showed up on the wrong day at the wrong time. And obviously that's not always the best foot to start off on. So please do make sure that you have read the interview invite carefully. And then of course, we've got all that information on there about how best to prepare. So it is a really useful piece of information as well. Throughout the interview, try and be as passionate, as enthusiastic as you can. We really do want to know that you're passionate about this area, that is something you do want to do, that you're interested in. So of course, showing that will only make the interview better. And then finally, be kind and considerate to every person you encounter throughout the recruitment process. So if you are rude to the receptionist, we will find out about it and it most likely will affect your outcome. So you've probably heard it before, but it really does matter that you are polite and respectful to everyone. As you're interviewing. Respect is one of our core values, so it is something that we measure against quite intensely. So do remember to just be respectful, be polite, be kind to everybody during your interview. So thank you all very much for listening. I've kind of sped through things there, but didn't want to keep you much longer with the late start. But if you do have any questions whatsoever, please do feel free to pop them in the chat and I can answer them now. So any questions around the interview itself, even if you've got a question about earlier stages in the recruitment process, I'm happy to answer. Our recruitment process is reviewed year on year, so there might be some changes if you're thinking about applying next year, but typically the final interview stage is always a kind of consistent step in the recruitment process, so that most likely won't change. Of course, with COVID and things, we had to make some amendments, but yeah, if you do have any questions about any stage in the recruitment process, please do feel free to ask now. So I can see we've got a question through. So will the interviews be at the office that you have applied to? So yes. So for example, if you've applied to our Wolverhampton office, the interview will be held at the Wolverhampton office. Like I said, we do appreciate that sometimes you've applied for a role maybe you're quite far away from if you're at university, but maybe you want to return home and then start your career there. So in those instances, we will try and accommodate you with a virtual interview. But yeah, the interview will be held at the office that you've applied for. We did have some assessment days earlier in the recruitment process when we went live around November time, and sometimes offices were merged. For example, our York and Leeds offices, because they work so closely together. But we, of course, will make you aware if we have any kind of events or anything like that where some offices may come together. So we've got another question. How long can I expect to hear back from Azets after completing the online assessment? Yes, so I mentioned earlier, the online assessment is a step in our process. So we use a platform called Brick. And what it essentially does is build a profile on you, and then we compare that to the ideal profile of, say, an auditor and see how well you link up with that. And we take that into account. So it can vary based on multiple factors in terms of how long we get back to you, in terms of application volumes. We do get lots of applications. Some roles have specific deadline dates, which will be listed on the job description. So some instances you might have completed the online test, but the role won't close until a week. So you can expect not to hear back from a week. Again, we do try to get back to you as quickly as possible. So you might hear back within 2 days, you might hear back within a week. It's really hard to gauge because there's a lot of individual factors like the role itself. But again, we do try and get back to you as quickly as possible. And if you are in need of an update, you are more than welcome to drop us an email. So we've got another question. Will there be any group activities or assessments integrated into the final interview? So the final interview itself is just an interview. So there's no presentation, there's no test element, there's no group activity element either. So it is just the interview. As I said, some of our roles did have assessment days earlier when we went live, but that was its individual kind of stage before the final interview. So the final interview is always just an interview in itself. But if we do have any kind of assessment days and things like that, that will be its own specific step in the recruitment process. So if anyone has any more questions, we do have a little bit of time. So again, please feel free to ask. But we do have lots of information on our website about each stage of the recruitment process. So we've got a little section called the process that will go through each individual step if you want some further information. And as I said, we do have our Instagram account as well, which has got some really good insights on. So I've got another question through. Can entry-level students apply for Azets? So yeah, all of our graduate schemes, placement roles, internships are entry-level. So we don't look for any kind of specific experience for those roles. If you do have some, great, that's a bonus. But we are not expecting you to apply for the role and come in with any prior experience. They're all entry-level. You just need to make sure you meet the entry requirements. So for our graduate schemes, for example, it's secured a 2-2 or on track to secure a 2-2 in your degree. And that's all that we ask for. So as long as you meet those requirements, you are more than welcome to apply. Again, we don't look for any specific experience previously. They're all entry level. any more questions? Just give it a minute. But yeah, if anyone is wanting to reach out after, you are able to contact us via the website. So our email address is earlycareersrecruitment@azets.co.uk. You can find that on the website, or just drop us an email. And all of our current opportunities are also live on our website now. So under the current opportunities tab, you will be able to filter for things like location, type. So if you want a graduate scheme or a placement, and then all the opportunities will be posted there. As I said, some deadline dates are varying. So some might have a specific date listed. If they don't, chances are it's a rolling recruitment role. So that just means the role will be open until it's filled. So in those instances, it's always best to get your application in early. I think that's all the questions for now. So I just want to say thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Hopefully you found this really useful. It's given you some insights into who we are as a company, our recruitment process, and how best to prepare for the interview stage. I hope to see lots of applications from you all soon. And then, of course, you all icing the interviews with this advice. But yeah, thanks so much. Again, if you do want to ask a question after this session, then please do feel free to reach out via email. So that's earlycareersrecruitment@azets.co.uk. Thanks all.